If you know me and my channel, you are probably familiar with my content on the NIFB, or New Independent Fundamental Baptist Hate Church, a hate church started by Steven Anderson, a man widely known as one of the most prominent hate preachers in America. A few months back, I interviewed one of Steven Anderson's children, Isaac Anderson, a man who now professes Nazi beliefs and attested to the intense abuse he suffered at the hands of his father. I haven't really covered the NIFB church since then. I haven't felt a need to. I felt as an independent journalist I had done my due diligence by exposing their hateful rhetoric and leaving a record of Steven Anderson's open abuse of his children. And then a few days ago, another one of the Anderson children reached out to me, Jonathan. He has since cut ties with both his father and mother. He wanted to go on record as to why he believes they should not be in contact with the rest of his siblings, including 8 children that still live with them. The following interview is a platform for him to tell his story. It is an account of intense emotional and physical abuse suffered at the hands of his mother, Zsuzsanna Anderson, and also the abuse that she has suffered under her husband, Steven Anderson. I cannot stress a content warning enough. The things that he attests to are nothing short of horrifying, and I have been able to corroborate many of them from his brother Isaac. Closed fist beatings, whippings with electrical cords, insulting and belittling children as young as 6, starvation as punishment, and exposure to the elements. And that is not all. I bring you this story so urgently to call attention to children who are still suffering. John is to be believed, and I fully believe his testimony here. His parents should be nowhere near their children. So for those who don't know you, introduce yourself.
My name is John Anderson. I am the 3rd oldest son of Steven Anderson, who is pastor of Faithful Word Baptist Church, has a whole big online following, and is notable for his super extremist teachings.
So you mentioned that you had seen my interview with your brother Isaac, and you told me that he actually downplayed the abuse that you and your siblings have suffered from your parents.
I think he glossed over, and there were a lot of things he didn't really mention or talk about. I don't think it was necessarily to protect my parents. I think it's just that he wants to still be a part of the family, and had he really gotten into everything, he would have been completely kicked out of the family. Not be able to see or talk to any of our younger siblings who still live at home, not be able to go to any family events, church events, whatever. And I think he just wanted to maintain some connection to them.
Does that mean that you are prepared to basically be cut off from your parents?
I already have been completely, yeah.
Did they do that, or did you?
They did that because I was kind of calling them out on some of their bullshit. I kind of reached a point where I wasn't gonna silently stand by and watch a lot of stuff that I would see happen at home when I'd visit my parents, and then they chose to completely cut me off because of that. So I'm not allowed to speak to any of my siblings that still live with my parents. I am not allowed at their house. My parents want nothing to do with me. I am not allowed at their church, anything like that.
What was the kind of final straw, or the inciting incident for you calling them out?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up experiencing a lot of abuse and witnessing a lot of abuse within my home. It wasn't just child abuse. My dad was extremely physically abusive towards my mother. Throughout, I would say, a good portion of my childhood, it wasn't an uncommon thing whatsoever for him to physically abuse her. When you're a little kid and you're raised with that and you're taught that that's normal, and you have that ingrained in you that that's normal, you accept it as normal. And then as I got older, I just slowly started to realize more and more of holy shit, that's kind of wrong. That's kind of bad. That's kind of messed up. And I kept telling myself, well, that's wrong, but I still think that they're good people. And yeah, I don't agree with that, but I still think they're good people because, hey, good people do bad things. Life isn't as simple as good guys and bad guys. And then it kind of reached a point where I started to see more and more that they weren't just good people that did some bad things. They were really not good people and not the people they portrayed them to be, not the kind of people that I think most of my dad's congregation or online followers think he is. And I definitely, their home life was not at all what they would put it out to be. I just kind of had a final confrontation where it's like I knew what I'd experienced, and at some point I had come to terms with, hey, they did that to me, that was wrong, whatever. But I'm an adult now. I don't live with them now. I moved out shortly after turning 18. I'm not experiencing that. But when I would go over to their house and when I would be around them, seeing that happen to my younger siblings that were little kids, that were toddlers, it was really more out of a place of looking to stick up for them than anything.
Now, you mentioned your mom, and how the kind of public image they put out. Your mom has kind of famously in funny circles has had a long running blog where she talks about, raising the kids and the family. So you don't think that she puts out the image that she puts out in that blog is not an accurate representation of the home.
Not at all. Not at all. I've never read her blog, but I think that the line was at the top, at least years and years ago. The last time I looked at it was real life stories from one big happy family. I would describe my family as anything but happy. More often than not, my mom was extremely, extremely angry. Like throughout my whole childhood, I think like she is somebody that you would just describe as just an angry, stressed out person. She was never there obviously were times when she'd be happy or chipper in a good mood or having fun with her kids or having fun with family or seeming to be enjoying being a parent. But for the most part, she on a daily basis very much did not enjoy being a parent, did not enjoy what she did. And I remember the phrase she said all throughout my childhood was always like she would just talk about how she wishes she could just leave. Never, she's like, man, I should just leave. I'd be so much happier if I just left, never saw any of you guys again. And then with somebody like that, it's like if you are constantly screaming and yelling, it's like, hey, everybody has bad days sometimes, but every single day, day in, day out, she's screaming, she's angry, she's stressed, she's upset, she's way more negative interaction than her, like for every positive interaction she would have with her kids, 10 negative interactions. So then it's like, well, are you really the person to create a blog to be like, hey, here's how you parent, here's how you have a happy family when you clearly don't enjoy being a parent? And me and my siblings, we always laughed at that even as kids. Like, what does she mean when she puts this stuff out and talks about how happy and wonderful it is? She doesn't like this shit. She clearly doesn't like us that much. She clearly doesn't like parenting us that much.
Did you ever go online and read things that were said about your father and your mother? Did any of that stuff have any bearing on it, or was it just kind of you coming to realize that on your own?
No, I mean, I really could care less about what people say online about my mom and dad. And like, I know that my dad has been on the news a bajillion times, and there are a lot of people and content creators that have attacked him for various things. I never really listened to that stuff. Never really cared about that stuff. Um, I don't know. Like the last thing I wanted to do in my free time was be like, go watch hate stories on my family. Like that's that's just not something I was interested in. It was definitely just stuff I witnessed myself and errors I saw and a lot of contradictions I was noticing.
You gave me a couple examples last time we spoke, like about how your mom would try to catch people in lies and was never quite right on the money, but your siblings would still end up being beaten anyway.
Yeah, so my mom was she's a very, I think she is a complete psychotic lunatic. Um Everybody attacks my dad, and I honestly do not have that much of an issue with the way my dad raised me. I do have issues with my dad that I will get into, but it really didn't have that much effect on how he raised me. And all in all, I think he was a pretty decent dad. And I will say it hurt a lot more when he cut ties with me than when my mom did. But yeah, my mom, like I said, she was an extremely angry person all the time, and she had these things that would just trigger her, and she knew no limit of what she would physically do to somebody when she got mad at them. So it could be a 4 or 5 year old kid gives her a little bit of attitude, she gets upset, she fucking starts smoking their ass. And it doesn't matter if they're screaming, begging for mercy, she wouldn't stop. There was nothing of like, hey, it was a spanking on the buttocks, like it talks about in the Bible, a reasonable amount of corporal punishment, like is outlined by their views as Christians and legal in the US. But it went far beyond that. And yes, so she had this weird obsession with like she thought she was like really smart and good at telling people when people are lying. Um I will say like she's terrible at it. She's awful at it. As somebody who grew up in a strict home, like most kids who grew up in a strict home, I hid a lot of stuff and I did a lot of stuff behind their back in my teenage years. I'm not justifying that, saying whether that was right or wrong. That's not the point. But I got away with pretty much everything. And then the stuff that she would get kids for lying about, like it was always like stuff they didn't actually do. And she had this weird obsession with something called statement analysis, which is this kind of like science, whatever, of basically the theory is that when people are lying, they will say certain cues and they will say certain things that can indicate that they're lying, that a truthful person won't say. And it's like subconscious, supposedly. I will say statement analysis is not admissible in court because it is highly inaccurate and can be affected by a lot of variables. But she took these statement analysis classes, thought she was really good at it, thought she was really smart, and she loved to catch people lying. Was terrible at it. Man, I lied about so many things, got away with it, like as an older teenager. But then, like as a little kid, constantly I would be doing stuff that I wasn't lying about and just getting fucking hammered for it. So to give a couple of examples of that, I had a younger brother with a peanut allergy. He or not peanut, pistachio allergy. So we had to be careful with nuts in the home. So my mom finds this cup of pistachio shells while she's cleaning, and it was like buried. It was like behind a washing machine. So chances are it had been there for a long time, and whoever left it there didn't remember leaving it there. I'm super confused, like what's going on. My parents are screaming at me, they're mad. And I was at the time, I was younger than 12 years old. I don't remember how exactly it was, but I was a little kid. You know what I mean? Immediately they're screaming at me like, "Why did you leave these pistachios out? We know it was you." And I'm like, "No, like it wasn't me." All these years later, it still wasn't me. I didn't do it. I don't know how those pistachio shells got there, right? Small issue blown way out of proportion by my mom's uncontrollable anger and psychotic behavior. So she then decides to get me to like get the information beaten out of me, like get me to confess with beating. That was a pretty common tactic growing up. And the implement that was used, which is something that was pretty commonly used, was a like electrical cable, like an extension cord, folded up, and I don't know, try taking one of those. Like the reason I'm doing this interview is for people that follow my dad, go to his church, because I want them to know the kind of person he is. If you think that that is an appropriate thing, I want you to take an electrical cord and hit yourself with it just once. See how bad that hurts. The metal coated with rubber hurts like a motherfucker, dude. So they start hitting me with that. You also can't aim it, so it wasn't like a thing of like any specific spot. I'm getting hit all over my head, neck, back, torso, getting absolutely beaten with this thing. They're trying to get me to admit that I left this thing out. So this is all over a cup of pistachio shells. That's psychotic behavior. That's not reasonable parenting. There's no way to justify that, right? Um, After a couple minutes of this, I black out. Like it was such a painful, traumatic thing, whatever. I lights go out. I hit the floor. They grab me. They throw me into a chair. It was like an office chair because it's happening in my dad's room, which like has this chair. Throw me in the chair. They literally grab water, splash it on my face. So it's like some like action movie villain type of interrogation on I would guess 10, 11 years old at the time. And they continue to, while I'm like sitting in this chair because I like couldn't stand up on my feet, continue to beat me. So finally, out of desperation, thinking I would like get out of some trouble, I was like, okay, fine, I did it. I'm sorry I lied. And then my dad proceeded to number one, beat me for lying, and number two, beat me for leaving out the pistachio shells, two equally hard beatings. So all in all, it was probably almost 10 minutes that I spent and getting grilled and beaten with an electrical cord, bloody marks all over me. In the state of Arizona, that is one of the guidelines from where it goes from legal corporal punishment of your children to child abuse is if it inflicts a mark, leaves a mark. Yeah, it would leave these like red scabby marks on you. One thing I'll say about my dad, to his credit, in situations like that, he always seemed to somewhat care in the sense of like my mom was having him do it. And my dad even would say to her, like, I don't think this is right. I don't think he's really lying. And my mom would be like, no, don't stop, keep going. He's lying. I know he's lying. I know for sure he's lying. And that is the one like dramatic difference between my mom and dad growing up is number one, when my mom was abusive on a daily basis, my dad to at least one of her kids every day. My dad, on the other hand, was pretty rare. And when my dad would do it, you felt some like humanity of like after he calmed down, he kind of regretted it a little bit. You could see that like he would hold back and like when a kid is screaming, crying, begging for mercy, he would listen to that a little bit. My mom, I've never seen her give one singular fuck. Like more times than I can count. I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids screaming for their life, begging for mercy because they're getting the absolute shit beaten out of them, right? Scared for their life. I know I was at times. And she never cared. The more they would scream, the angrier she'd get, and she would not stop, would not let up whatsoever. So
And
that was one
so,
example. Another example of this whole lying statement analysis thing. A couple of my dad's peanut butter cups go missing from the refrigerator. He's pissed about that. Again, it's not that deep. Maybe be like, hey guys, don't take my shit. But when you live in a house with that many people, sometimes stuff is gonna go missing out of the fridge. I know I've lost a lot of food out of the fridge too. So my dad's mad. A couple days, he buys new peanut butter cups. They go missing too. So he's mad. Okay, he's mad. I get it. Your kids shouldn't be taking your candy. But again, pretty normal action from a kid. And a normal action should be met with a normal punishment. So they can't figure out who is doing this. And my mom, she's like, my statement analysis skills aren't good enough, basically. She's like, we're going to call an expert. So she had every single one of her kids write this like essay where like it was like 4 or 5 questions and we wrote essay answers, right? You couldn't just like answer the question. You wrote an essay answer. So the questions were like, did you take the peanut butter cups? Tell me about what you did all day, the day they went missing. What do you think should happen to the person that took them? What's wrong with taking them? And it was like super, super weird. Like, that's really fucking weird. That's like some like communist mind control, like Soviet Union type thing where we have to write these essays about like, and I remember my essay, dude, and I was 13 at the time, maybe, I don't know. And I'm writing my essay like because I was smart and I knew what obviously, right? I'm writing like, oh man, whoever did this is a horrible person. I don't know why they would disrespect dad in that kind of way. And I felt super weird about it at the time. I'm like, this isn't really normal. So then all the kids write it. So the youngest kid that was made to write an essay was my sister, whose name I'm not gonna say because I haven't gotten permission on that. But she was probably 7, like really young. So she obviously can't write a good essay. So she just writes like, oh, I'm gonna, I didn't take them. And my mom emails all these essays to her like statement analysis mentor, who 2 years later my parents had a falling out with because they're like, this guy's a scammer. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. He's a scammer selling these online courses. So my parents themselves later recognized this dude as a scammer and not legit. And he goes, that child's lying, the 6 or 7 year old. And then my parents proceed to beat the absolute shit out of her for it. I don't know if she took the peanut butter cups or not. Probably not. So, and it was kind of a common thing where that happened several times, where she always got blamed for stuff because she's a little kid, so just didn't know what to say. Whereas all of us were a bit older, kind of figured out like, okay, this is what I say. Um, Another thing to go back to that first story, a couple of years later, that's another thing. So my mom, like anytime you'd bring something up, she would like just like lie and like deny stuff. And at one point she tried to make the claim, I have never beaten a confession out of anyone. Absolute lie. She did it all the time, right? You could ask my siblings. I don't know which of them will be willing to talk to you. You have Isaac's number. You could text him and back up any of this information with it. I don't know if he'd be willing to make a video about it, but in private conversation, I know him and I have had significant conversations about it. Me and all my siblings have talked about this. This was common stuff. My mom, I told that story. My parents like, that never happened. And this was maybe less than a year later. So I clearly remember. And like, no, that didn't happen. So my mom tells my dad, hey, John's saying this happened. And my dad is like, he freaks out on me, like, how dare you say that, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you want to see what it's like to get really beaten? And he grabs me, throws me on the ground. I remember it was in my sister's bedroom at the old house, throws me on the ground, kneeling on my chest, fucking pounding me, fist to the face, just closed fist. Um, that I can think of right now, that is the only time I was hit with a closed fist by one of my parents. Well, no, by my dad. My mom did a few times when I was like older, but it was like she's like a 5'2" woman. And when I was 16 years old, 17 years old, that obviously didn't like do any damage or hurt. But my parents would use like stuff like the electrical cord because it doesn't break bones, doesn't scar, and inflicts the maximum amount of pain without doing that kind of permanent damage that would then make them more likely to get caught. So,
And really quick, you mentioned that what is who's the youngest sibling that's currently living with your parents?
born in summer of 2022, so he is just over 2 years old.
Okay. And
So,
so around 3 or 4 or 5 and 6, that's when these kind of beatings would start.
I mean, I have seen my mom hit babies for crying. Like,
When
I
you
would
when
say,
you say hit babies,
I'm saying like she has an infant child, right, that is unable to walk, unable to crawl, unable to talk, and she's carrying them or has them like swaddled in a wrap like a baby carrier, and they're crying. She would, again, ask my brother or ask any advice. So it's like, this is crazy shit. But she would use like a wooden spoon or something and just like wrap them with it. Um, but yeah, I would say serious beatings start around 4 or 5 years old, but just no, I've seen her hit a baby for crying.
and are those other beatings still happening to
Oh,
this day?
100%. None of the kids are safe in that home. I do not believe that my parents should be trusted or have access to their children. I am trying my best to get CPS to do something about it. CPS has got to be one of the most like one of the least capable government organizations. They are very afraid of a lawsuit and they don't do anything about anything until it's too late. Um, yeah, I'm working on that. I've done my due diligence reporting it. The caseworker I got was terrible, never even talked to me, just only talked to my parents. So I'm gonna file a complaint against that caseworker, try to get another caseworker. I'm trying my best with that, but I've spoken to my siblings and they are all either like the ones living at home, like they're obviously afraid that if they don't get removed from the home and my parents don't get convicted, then like, well, what are they going to do to me if I testified? Um, my oldest brother, kind of weird, has a lot of weird beliefs of his own. So he's like, yeah, nothing wrong with the way we were raised. He's just kind of a product of that environment. Um, my brother Isaac, like I said, does not want to cut ties with our family, so he's not willing to testify. And yeah, it's really hard for me to do anything without some kind of help from them. I think I definitely suffered a lot of negative effects of growing up in that household and growing up the way I did. Um, for this interview, I'm really only talking about like the physical abuse because emotional abuse and mental abuse isn't something that's really illegal or there's really a set standard of what's wrong or not. But my mom is extremely awful towards her kids. Like my sisters, like she'd like get mad at my teenage sisters who are like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, right? At that age. And she would just like be like, you're ugly. No guy's gonna want to date you. Just like those kinds of things where it's just like trying to be just like as damaging and hurtful as possible. In the last conversation with my mom, she was going off on my sister because my 15-year-old sister because she didn't like that she got up late and she just starts like screaming at her, going off on her. And I said, like, man, you really gotta like this was part of the interaction that was like the final straw. And I said to her, I said, wow, you really gotta like think about what you're saying to her. She is a 15-year-old girl. Like that's going to affect her self-esteem. That's going to affect her self-worth, her self-image. And she said, I hope it ruins her self-image and her self-worth to the point where she regrets making me mad and knows that she needs to listen to me. So she kind of had this strategy of cutting down her kids and just making them feel worthless, whatever, so that they thought like, yeah, I'm a worthless piece of shit. My mom is amazing, wonderful, and whatever she says. My mom is an extremely manipulative, controlling, narcissistic person. She thinks that she knows more about everything than everyone. Um, you can't tell her anything new. She can't learn anything new. She's an expert on every subject. If anyone disagrees with her, they are objectively wrong. She's objectively right. She is textbook narcissist. Textbook world revolves around her.
And you mentioned going back to the church for a second. To your knowledge, did anybody from the church, any church members, see this abuse happen or see your father and mother get angry at you or your other siblings?
I'm gonna wait for these people to pass. Says the voice.
Okay, enjoy.
I mean, I'm sure that some people saw instances here and there, but this wasn't something they were doing out in the open. Like I said, they very much wanted to portray this image of like, hey, we are this amazing, wonderful, traditional family that has traditional good values, and we have a lot of kids. And my dad is like super pro having a lot of kids, right? My parents 100% had way more kids than they could handle. So they were very inept with taking care of their kids, with raising their kids. And then that I think caused a lot of the frustration and anger that led to abuse. So that wasn't something they really wanted to put forward. Um, I do know that I can remember multiple times from my childhood where it was like going to like a pool party at a going to the 4th of July pool party at a church member's house. Hey, put a shirt on when you go swimming because you have marks on your body, right? Of like from getting beaten. So I'm sure they saw little things here and there, but no, the majority of it was behind closed doors and hiding it.
Your father, you mentioned last time we spoke that your father, anything that made him look bad in front of like the congregation or anything would get him to kind of lash out or reprimand you guys.
Yeah, so kind of like the main trigger, my dad, contrary to what like opinion you might have from him from his online persona, is not a very angry guy on the day to day. Growing up, he yelled at me maybe once a year. On the day to day, he's a pretty chill, laid back, does his own thing kind of guy. And yeah, I'm not gonna make him out to be worse than he was. Like, I'm just saying the facts of it, what actually happened. He was not an angry guy on the day to day the way my mom was. He was a pretty nice dad that actually did a lot of nice things for me growing up. Um, but yeah, the one thing that would really trigger him to get into like that just like blind rage and get abusive or get crazy would be if he felt that we were making him look bad. Or he felt that we were making him look weak or inept or not in control because he puts out, he teaches like, talks a lot about like, the man of the house being super authoritarian and like controlling and just like that textbook kind of patriarchy. So if he felt that we were making it look like he wasn't really having one of those situations and he wasn't really in control, which I will say right now, he 100% was not in control of what happened at home. My mom was much more in control than he ever was because she was an angry person that was freaking out and she's a bully and a narcissist. And he very much would be like, go along with things he disagreed with just because he didn't want to deal with her crazy behavior.
Would you say that would you say that your father is insecure?
Yeah, probably. I would say that the amount he talks about tearing down others and putting down others and the amount he obsesses over those types of things and the amount he obsesses over having control over your wife as a man, and he refers to his he's like, my church is a dictatorship, I'm the dictator, blah blah blah, and it's like, yeah, that to me is a pretty clear sign of insecurity.
And going back to your mom again, real quick, you mentioned at the beginning that your dad was more abusive towards your mom.
Yeah, so um the my parents do not get along, they do not like each other. um Sometimes they'll put on a front of being positive to each other. Like in the day to day, they're extremely negative towards each other. Has such a weird, fucked up relationship. They dated for 2 weeks before getting married and came from colossally different backgrounds. So it's like, yeah, no shit, that's not gonna work out. That's not a good idea. Um, and they constantly fought, constantly. So I remember at one age, at some age, my dad was having like an especially bad fight with my mom and couldn't get her to agree with him or do what he was saying or whatever. So he was kind of like, finally, like, I'm gonna use physical punishment. I use physical punishment on my kids to get them to do what they say, and I'm gonna use that on you as well. So that was something I like the first time it happened, I didn't know that's what was happening. But then after a couple months, I was able to look back and see very clearly, oh shit, that's what it was. Pretty sure all my siblings know about this. Um, couldn't they weren't very good at hiding it. Um, my dad used the same electrical cord on her that he used on us. And it was like they would be screaming, they would be fighting, whatever, and then it'd be like kids go out in the backyard or kids go to your room and then you would hear the sound, the bam, bam beating sounds, my mom screaming. There were times when I would see like the mark, because the electrical cord would leave this like C-shaped mark on you, like the tip, and it was like scabbed up red and flamed. It was like, I don't know how to describe it. It was like a bruise, right? But then like the ring where it was like this like bloody mark in the shape of it. And I would see those on her. So it was very, very clear what was happening. My parents kind of hid it from us. It was always like a thing like all of us knew about. And then finally, after like a year, I talked to my siblings. I talked to my brother Isaac. Him and I were pretty close growing up. And I'm like little kids at this time. I was maybe 10 again. Um, and I was like, dude, like, am I tripping or is dad beating mom? Like, is that what's going after a few months this started happening? And I know they had some kind of he even at one point had a system where he would like tally up, like he'd be like if he couldn't do it at that point because we were around, he'd be like, all right, well, that's 3 more for talking back to me, and that's 5 more. And then I talked to my brother. I'm like, yo, like, am I wrong? Am I tripping? Or is dad beating mom? He's like, no, like, yeah, I've known too. Like, that's what's happening. Later, my mom and I did have significant conversations about this after I moved out. So shortly after I moved out, or around the time I moved out, my mom decided that this isn't something that I think if my dad hears this video, he's not going to know about any of this. So this is going to be new information for him. My mom decided that she was done with him. So yeah, I will say my dad stopped doing that. It was about a 5 or 6 year period where it happened. Then to my knowledge, he stopped. But I know there were a couple of outbursts where he would just like bam hit her in a fight. But I just asked my brother about it the other day. I was like looking like, hey, do you remember like what the time frame was when I was like preparing for this interview? And it was like over like probably a 6 year period of, but he stopped. And there were a couple instances that I know of where he just like hit her. I don't remember, like it wasn't like the scheduled like beatings where it was like a system where it was like same way it was with us. So my mom decided that she was done with him and she wanted to leave him and get sole custody of the kids. And she wanted to basically, so she came out better on the divorce because then she'd be single parenting 12 kids. She wanted to get him put away for domestic abuse so she could, get the house, whatever, while he's off in prison. And she called me and was kind of trying to recruit me to that. And I basically told her, like, at this point, I said, if it goes to court, I will testify to what I saw, but I will not, like, you're not going to get me to testify against my dad, but not testify against you. I was like, because, okay, dad was abusive. And she wanted to like testify that he was also abusive towards the kids, so he wouldn't get any custody rights. And I was like, you were 10 times more abusive than dad ever was. So if you go press charges and I get called in as a witness, I'm not going to lie under oath and say he never did anything, but I'm also not going to sugarcoat or hide anything you did as well.
How many kids are still living with your parents?
8. 8. There's a situation going on right now where a 9th one is kind of rogue. It's my 17-year-old sister. She is very unsafe in that home. She's trying to get away, and my dad is trying to catch her right now and bring her back against her will. That's all I'm going to talk about that situation right now because it's an open legal thing. But
Have you been able to see as you've grown up, as you've had a little bit of distance, have you been able to see the mental effects that the abuse and that kind of stress have had on your siblings?
100%. I work now in a job that is considered to be one of the most stressful jobs there is. I'm not some little bitch who's never seen stress, never seen something difficult. I have dealt, I deal with life and death situations almost every day at my job. And I have never once experienced half the stress that I experienced on a daily basis as a little kid living at home. And like I said, this video is, I guess, targeted towards followers and people of my who follow my dad, just trying to kind of shed a little light on the truth about the kind of person he is. But and I know a lot of those types of people will be like, don't really recognize emotional damage or mental abuse or emotional abuse or mental problems. I'll say whatever you do or don't believe about that, okay, that's not the point. I think we can agree that if you put a little kid in an environment where they spend their entire childhood constantly in fear, and it wasn't just like you break the rules, you get physically abused. It was like my mom was just an angry, psychotic person, and she would be like, I don't like the way you looked at me, whatever, and just go absolutely ape shit and beat you. And I think that, and it wasn't uncommon for my parents to threaten, I will beat you within an inch of your life. And I very much believe that they meant it, and at the time when I was a little kid and I'm getting beaten, and it's like, I don't know when that's going to stop. I don't know how that's going to stop. There definitely were times that I was afraid for my own life, afraid for my own safety on a daily basis as a little kid. And yeah, that is going to have a permanent damaging effect. I've noticed that also having an effect on my other siblings, picking up stuff, noticing stuff. And yeah, that's not a good way to raise a kid. It's not a healthy environment for a developing mind.
Did anybody ever try to contact, see, like any of the kids growing up, try and contact CPS or call the police or anything like that?
No, we were heavily, heavily manipulated, heavily, heavily brainwashed. And I feel stupid how long it took me to see how bad they were and do something about it. But like when you are raised in that environment and you are from a young age child, and I was always told that, man, if you ever that my dad likes to use God as his boogeyman, right? Likes to use God as a threat. He throws around of, hey, if you make me mad, God's gonna destroy you, God's gonna kill you, God's gonna ruin your life. As a little kid constantly being taught that, I believed it. And now as an adult, I realize, no, God is not going to punish you for going against somebody who is an evil, bad person doing wicked things.
And just for anybody out there who might think that you are, you have turned away from Christianity or you're an atheist now, you do still consider yourself a Christian. You do still
Yeah,
follow Christ.
I'm 100% a Christian. To my dad's followers, right? Like, I understand that I might have a certain image, and you might have seen certain pictures of me or heard videos about me, or seen my social media and been like, oh, this guy's lifestyle isn't very Christian. Like, I'm not gonna say that I am the perfect model example of a Christian. That's not what I'm putting myself out as. That's not what I've ever put myself out as. But I do genuinely have faith, and I do genuinely believe in the Bible, God, and all that stuff. And I do genuinely like a lot of people in my dad's church. And I think that's a big difference between me and my brother Isaac. He came on here and kind of like attacked everybody in my dad's church. Said they're all like a bunch of idiots and weirdos. And I think there are some weirdos. Like, but I think that there are also a lot of people who are good people that got misled by my dad, because he is a very charismatic person. He is a very captivating, compelling person. And like, let's face it, like, he's a good speaker. He can get people fired up, and people who are upset about certain modern social, political, moral issues, and then they see him and he's having his pep rallies and he's getting excited and he's getting all charismatic like they were. I think a lot of good people are sucked in by that and do not really know the kind of person he is and do not actually, and I don't think a lot of them are bad people. And that is who I'm making this video for, is to warn these people. And I hope that there will be some kind of, that people in the church will see this video and there can be some kind of a conversation where you guys can, as a church, decide if that is the kind of person you want leading you, because the Bible in its qualifications for a pastor says ruling well your own house. Do you think that spousal and child abuse is ruling well your own house? That's a question you got to ask yourself.
I mean, like it sounds like you could go on for a long time with examples of what
Yeah.
happened in the house.
Yeah, definitely. The abuse, like I said, it was a daily thing, and it was
You
kind of like,
mentioned the kind of emotional or psychological manipulation your mom would do. Do you want to talk about that anymore?
yeah, I mean, I remember like oh yeah, she had this weird thing where she like convinced all of her kids that we were her property and that basically we owed her for raising us, of like, hey, like I spend money to house you, to feed you, to clothe you, so you owe me a certain amount in return. That's not how that works, right? Like when you raise your kids, you are paying back the debt that you owe your parents for raising you. And one day I will repay that debt by raising kids of my own. Like that's just how society works. You raise next generation. But she very much, and she referred to us as her property. So one way that that would come up was my mom's kind of a lazy person, right? Um, she puts herself out as this very hard worker. She does not make her own bed. Every morning, she makes one of the kids make her own bed. If she is sitting down on her phone scrolling and she wants a cup of water, she makes a kid get her a cup of water. And obviously, I'm not saying that's abusive or morally wrong to be that way, but that just goes to show you like she put as much work as possible on her kids. And throughout my entire childhood, I was constantly missing out on things because, like, even as a teenager, hey, I want to go hang out with my friends. No, you need to babysit your younger siblings. It's like, well, I didn't have them. That wasn't my decision to have those kids. You had those kids. And she would be like, she would even be like, why should I take care of them, not you guys? Why should you guys go out and have fun while I'm stuck here with kids? Well, because it's your kids. And that's some of the things she kind of would gaslight us on and try to make us. But um getting injured was definitely like, that was something you got in big trouble for. Um, I, so I'm not in the military. I haven't been in the military, so I don't know how true this is. This is what I was told, is that in the military, if you injure yourself through negligence, then you can get in trouble with your command, and they basically charge you with whatever the military law is for damaging government property, and you can face consequences for that. So my mom would pull that with us of like, the military does that, and if you hurt yourself, then you're damaging my property because now you can't work for me to the fullest. One way that this came up, I've always been somebody who has very active hobbies, never been into video games or being inside. I've always been outside doing stuff. And I was really into dirt bikes, bicycles, BMX, like skateboards, all that stuff. One year when I was 17, I broke 4 bones in 1 year. Um, the last injury was a skateboarding injury. I wasn't being stupid. I wasn't like doing some drunk, hey, watch me type shit. I was just out skateboarding, took a nasty fall off my skateboard, broke my arm. My mom was out of town. I go to the ER. I have surgery. I have like 2 plates, 12 screws placed in my arm. My mom got home and she found out. I was like, hey, this happened while you were gone. My dad took me to the ER and she like lost her shit screaming at me because she'd already taken me to a bunch of doctor's appointments that year for other injuries from motorcycles. And she basically said, I will not take you to a single appointment. So I never got medically cleared. I never finished that up. The arm works fine. Cut the cast off eventually. Hope it healed well. but that actually did severely detriment me in my adult life because I tried to join the military and I basically failed my physical because they could see that I had surgery on my arm, broke my arm, and I was never medically cleared for it. I tried to go back and get medically cleared now. I'm no longer under my parents' insurance, so my parents' insurance won't cover it. My current insurance won't cover it because it was for an injury. So they're basically like, yeah, like tough shit. Like, so that was harm a bit. My mom would be like, if the kids got hurt, she never wanted to take kids to the ER because she like nobody wants to sit and wait at the ER, right? I understand that. I get that. But if you have 12 kids, you're going to spend 12 times as much time in the ER as if you have one kid. And when kids got hurt, she very much like guilted them about that, made them feel bad about that. And yeah, there was definitely a lack of medical care for things that should have gotten medical care.
Your
Like when she
brother
refused to take me to the doctor for breaking my arm.
Isaac mentioned a story about your dad cutting open one of your brother's heads on a piece of brick.
Mhm.
Do you
Yeah.
remember that happening?
Yeah. There's a sitcom show, The Office. Not a bad show if anybody's seen it. It's not like a dirty, raunchy show. There's no nudity, there's no sex. It's rated TV 14. Just a typical sitcom. Well, my brother was watching that at 17 years old. 17 or 18. I want to say 18, but he was living with my parents. And no, he was 17. I remember. And he was watching it while out with a church person. That church person was offended by that because they're very sheltered, very against all that stuff. I remember getting my ass absolutely beaten for listening to like 80s pop music, 80s classic rock, not even like gangster rap or anything, like fucking REO Speedwagon and Bryan Adams. I got my ass beaten for that. Later now, my parents have also changed a lot over the years. Now my parents both listen to that same kind of music. I got beaten for that. Was it did it suddenly become right? They've also changed a lot. And yeah. But anyway, getting sidetracked. That's beside the point. My this church member complained to my parents and was like, hey, he's watching this worldly show because they're super like cutting us off from society. I'm sure that was also an aspect of them trying to control our opinions and control our thoughts. Like, why does North Korea not have access to the internet? And my brother came home and my dad was mad about that. Like I said, if he felt that we made him look stupid to church members, that really activated his rage, that really triggered him. So he grabbed my brother, threw him. His head hit like we lived in a brick house at that time, hit a corner of a windowsill and split it open. He didn't receive medical care for that, but like I didn't need it, honestly. Like, I think my brother did a little bit exaggerate that story when he told it. It wasn't like gushing blood, it was like a 1 inch wound. So, yeah, ideally, he would have gone to like urgent care and gotten like a staple or two or a couple stitches, but it definitely wasn't like a life threatening issue.
Have you ever seen like life-threatening issues that weren't addressed, that didn't get proper medical attention for?
Um, I work in medicine. My mom would call me a lot and be like, hey, John, this just happened to one of the kids. Professional opinion, should I take him to the hospital? And I would always be like, yeah, you should. Because it was always head injuries. Kids hit their heads a fuck ton. Like falling off scooters, falling off bikes. And with head injuries, you always want to get it checked out because whatever symptoms there are of a serious head injury, like a brain bleed, by the time they arise, it is too late. There's going to be serious permanent effects. So I tell anyone, hey, if you hit your head hard, go to the ER. My parents have access medical care, right? They get free healthcare through the government because they have a million kids. So it wasn't at any cost, but my mom was straight up. It comes back to her being a somewhat lazy person, just not wanting to sit with her kids in the ER. And it's like, I get that. Nobody wants to go be at the ER that much, but then you shouldn't have had that many kids. You should have when you have that many kids, you have to be responsible for them. So I can't think of anything where it was like a life-threatening issue.
But still irresponsible
But yeah, but
overall.
still irresponsible. And my mom would always be like, well, I checked their pupils and their pupils are dilating normally. Because once again, my mom thinks she knows everything about everything. She's like, well, their pupils are dilating normally, so they must not have brain damage. And the thing about that is pupil changes from a head hit are a very late onset symptom. So by the time your pupils aren't working correctly, so yeah, you're right, you can check pupils for a head injury. It's really not very effective in the few minutes after. That's a symptom that would pop up to hours later, and by that time, there's already permanent damage being done. And I try to explain to her that to her. She never listened because she knows everything about everything better than everyone.
Did your mom ever do you know about a kind of fundamentalist Christian family called the Pearls?
Yeah, yeah.
Did your mom ever
Mhm.
kind of ascribe to their teachings? Because they became very infamous for corporal punishment.
You know what's funny is my mom really like she wanted to like be big on YouTube and have her big blog, and she always like attacked them on her blog and on her YouTube channel because I don't know, it was a way to get views because that was at the time some big drama within their circles. And I was always confused about like why she was attacking them because like she was as abusive or more abusive than they were. She attacked them because they talked about locking a kid outside in the cold, which is very wrong, obviously. More times than I can count, she locked her kids outside in Phoenix in 115, 120-degree heat for hours on end.
As
Equally
punishment?
dangerous.
As
It
punishment
was it
for what you were
wasn't it
doing?
wasn't necessarily like a punishment. It was like a you're annoying me, go outside, and then she'd lock the door. So it was just like it wasn't necessarily like a punishment, but it was just like I don't want to deal with you right now. And like the kids would be like, hey, we're really hot out here, and it'd be, yeah, 120 degrees. She might lie and say, oh, well, they had a pool they could go swimming in. The pool yard and the backyard were two separate yards, out different yards, and she would lock us in the backyard with no access to the pool, and she would lock us in the front yard with no access to the pool very often. Again, ask my siblings. We were locked out there for hours on end with no water, with no food. If you knocked on the door and were asked for that stuff, you'd most likely get the shit beaten out of you because the whole reason she was doing it was just to get rid of us because she was annoyed by us. Didn't want to be around us because she doesn't like being a mom that much, doesn't like having that many kids. I get it. I wouldn't want to have 12 kids either, but nobody made them have 12 kids. And they're the ones that are out there putting that forth as an idealistic lifestyle.
Did they ever send you or others to bed without meals? Did they ever deprive you of food, water?
Oh, dude, 100%. There is a Bible verse that says, if a man does not work, neither should he eat, which is basically saying that if you're not working, you're not making money to earn food, then tough shit you can't eat. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing, right? I understand why that might be controversial, but at the same time, I think that's reasonable if, of course, you are somebody that is able to work. If you're able to work and you choose to work, that's survival of the fittest. But my mom would take that to be with her little kids of like not allowing kids to eat. I missed a lot of meals. That was a really common punishment for us. She would always quote that verse. It says if a man in 17th century English, in the way the Bible is written, when it talks about a man, it's referring to an adult. It's not referring to children. It's not referring to little kids. And she very often would use withholding food as a punishment, which is illegal by Arizona state child abuse standards. Yes.
If you could tell your parents anything, kind of what would you want to tell your dad and your mom?
I mean, it would be two separate things. For my mom, I'm sorry you had me, and I'm sorry that I got raised by a psychotic, terrible person. I genuinely believe my mom's a sociopath. I don't believe she's a good person. I believe she's a terrible, abusive person. And I just regret that she was my mom. And it's hard, and it has become especially hard as an adult when I tried to talk to her about things, and I tried to explain like what she did wrong, in an effort to have a relationship. We want to have parents, we want to have family. As it is right now, I have no family to speak of. I have my brother, and that's about it. My grandpa, who I was super close with, my parents have lied to him about me, and he now wants nothing to do with me as well. I'm sure that the rest of my extended family shares a similar sentiment. And I really regret it. I wish I had a mom that cared about me and loved me. I don't think my mom loves me or any of her kids. I think she loves the control having a parent. Being a parent makes her feel she has, but she doesn't individually love her kids for who she is. And it's been really hard to accept that about them, because then in a way I'm losing them by acknowledging. My dad, on the other hand, I think all in all, my dad was a pretty good dad. I can't justify the kind of man he was in other areas, but my dad is somebody where it's like it's really conflicting, because like I remember so many times that he was nice, and so many ways that he did always seem to look out for his kids, and bring his kids on trips and involve his kids. And he always like had this thing of like, he works a lot, but he always wanted to be a part of his kids' life. And so he'd always have his kids with him at work. And like, I'm very conflicted on, seeing the kind of man he was in a lot of areas, and seeing some really shitty things he did, because it's like, it doesn't matter the opinions about the kind of person I think my mom is, still isn't right to be doing that kind of domestic abuse. Um, I don't think my dad is necessarily an intrinsically bad guy. I think he has a lot of issues, unresolved issues, that led him down a very dark, bad path and caused him to do a lot of bad things. But, after the final incident with my mom and me realizing the kind of person she was, my dad called me, because I told my mom I was going to go to CPS. So my dad calls me, and I said, Dad, like, for the record, I don't have anything against you. There were times I think my dad did abusive, wrong things, but it's like, let's face it, in 18 years of raising a kid, I'm sure a lot of parents have gone too far and hit their kid a little too hard. And I wanted to have a reasonable conversation with him. Within 30 seconds, he was screaming at me, cussing me out. So I don't feel bad for him that if this ruins his career, because I think that doesn't matter his intentions or if he was a good person at the start of it all. He's a grown adult. He made his bed, and now it's time to lay in it.
And if you could say anything to your siblings.
I mean, that's another hard subject, because it's like, some of my siblings I really liked, and I always tried to be like a good role model for, a good influence on, and show them, a better way, and show them how you could be a better man, to my younger brothers, and show them better values and beliefs to hold in life. And yeah, I mean, I guess don't let whatever, when you do eventually realize what's wrong with my parents, don't let that turn you into a jaded, dark person. There are a lot of better people out there. There is good in the world that is not like that. And if you hate their version of Christianity and the kind of people they are, don't let that turn you against Christianity completely, because they are not the average Christian.
You can help report what is happening by following the links down below.